What's up, it's Lerald. We've had a lot of people asking us to make a successor to Toxic Rain Pathfinder and Path of Exile 2, and this build absolutely delivers on that promise. I hate to say it, but honestly it is better than Toxic Rain Pathfinder is in Path of Exile 1. It is so incredibly fast and smooth, the damage is incredible, the clear is great, as you can see, it's tanky, and best of all, it is super cheap to get up and running. You don't need an insane bow, you don't need a headhunter, you don't really need anything expensive at all, but you can clear like a Deadeye, if not faster. You certainly can throw a bunch of currency into the build if you want, and the tankiness will be outrageous. I've been clobbering tier 15s with this build since like level 75 or something. I died one time in maps because I stood in back-to-back boss slams like a skilled genius. The character's level 85 now, and it is cruising. This is a bit of an early look, obviously. Usually we wouldn't put together a video about a build until we'd gotten a little more hands-on time with it, but this is working so extremely well that we just wanted to push it out now, let people know, and then continue to make tweaks and push it even harder later on. So let's get into the build, but first be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Join our Discord as well. We're over 1,200 members and still growing strong. Alright, so since this is a bit of an early preview here, I'm going to start with leveling and kind of the basic leveling setup and just kind of some leveling tips. So, technically speaking, you can level with Poison Burst Arrow from level 1. I did that. I didn't really love it. I played around with a Mercenary, and I actually used this setup, Rampart Raptor, and Fragmentation rounds, and this feels awesome in Act 1, just to like show off how it works. Basically, like, this crossbow, when you reload, for the next like 4 seconds or so, you're able to just like chain gun attacks. So it allows you in Act 1 to basically just like walk around holding down right click on stuff. So you can make this even better with some greater runes of alacrity. These things are pretty cheap and they add 8% skill speed a piece. So you could get some pretty high attack speed, and this will carry you all the way through Act 1. Of course, you can just start with Poison Burst Arrow and just follow the tree basically all the way out to the expected end point, and that's kind of what you're going for. You know, normally maybe I would put together like a whole bunch of like leveling trees, but kind of based on some of the feedback we've gotten from people who play on console, some of those like multiple trees are actually harder to follow, so I'm just going to kind of walk through the tree instead. You just want to come out through all the damage nodes at the start through Act 1 and come down here and take like these poison nodes down here and this move speed node down here, and then it's kind of nice to take a jewel slot down here. You can get like some good bonuses out of that if you want, whatever. Then you want to take more poison nodes and kind of keep going throughout the rest of the tree. Now you can see some of these lines are in red, some are in green. That is for, red is for weapon set 1, green is for weapon set 2. I'm not messing with any of that in the campaign, so everything that's in green, I'm not taking in the campaign. Everything that's in red, I am taking. I'm taking it with like, not using any weapon set stuff in the campaign at all. And so that basically like taking all these points in the like lower third of the tree here up until this point, up until like getting Blinding Strike, and then I think it's better to just cut over to Leeching Toxins, get that, and get this set of toxic, like this set of poison mods over here, escalating toxins, toxic tolerance, and building toxins, all of those. So you would just cut through the middle here. Ultimately, this winds up not being a very efficient set of like 4 travel nodes to path through long term, but I stuck with this like just cut across here until around like level 80. That was when I finally spec'd out of it. Then the rest of it is just kind of like pursuing as much crit as you can, you know, a good bit of evasion here as well, and like some evasion and energy shield, but mostly it's just like crit, crit, crit. And then I really like to take Step Like Mist, get some move speed, get some free stats, bit of mana regen, you know, nothing bad with that. And the travel nodes on the way to it are like evasion and energy shield. And that's kind of our main defensive layer. We have a good amount of life, 2,300 life. Really not bad for an evasion and energy shield based character, but like over 3k ES, over 10,000 evasion, like, you know, looking pretty good from a defensive standpoint for a character that's not even level 90 yet. Alright, so that's kind of the tree for leveling. In terms of the Ascendancy, the first 2 points you want to take are absolutely Contagious Contamination. This is kind of why I don't really like Poison Burst Arrow in the first, whatever, 5 levels of the campaign or so. Poison spreading just kind of stinks until you get Contagious Contamination, or at the very least you get your first Spirit Gem and you're able to pick up Plague Bearer. Once you get Plague Bearer, it's really not bad. You shoot a a poison burst arrow at something, and then you cast Plague Bearer on the enemies, and that's kind of going to be core to your rotation for the rest of the lifetime of the character. But Contagious Contamination is really like why this build has such good clear. You can fire a poison arrow into a room, it'll bounce around like a fart in an elevator and just like clear everything out with one shot. Then for your second points, you kind of have a choice. I think it makes more sense, like damage-wise, to take Overwhelming Toxicity, especially for bosses toward the end of the campaign, but I didn't. I actually took Relentless Pursuit to just be completely unaffected by slows, which feels awesome. Now you would think Traveler's Wisdom getting 6 passive points is like pretty great, especially early on in the lifespan of the character, and it is, but it is just not better than the clear that you get out of Contagious Contamination, and I really don't think Herald of Plague is like as good of a replacement for it. You're able to get Herald of Plague in, I guess, mid-Act 3, so that is something you could run instead and take Traveler's Wisdom, but that's a lot of swapping stuff back and forth. I just don't think it's worth it. So, in whatever order you want to do, Contagious Contamination first, then Overwhelming Toxicity and Relentless Pursuit is your second and third, and then your final one into Running Assault. And that means that once everything's kind of set up, you're going to be able to, well, let me get my keybind correctly here. You're going to be able to basically shoot and move at like this level of speed all the time. Like barely being slowed down at all while running around blasting stuff. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to skills. And, you know, Poison Burst Arrow, that's like the most basic thing that you get. You get that at level 1, and it's really simple. It just shoots an arrow, and it technically doesn't hit, but it does. It affects enemies with poison. It's 100% poison chance. It doesn't seem to be modified by any like increased ailment thresholds or anything. Like that just gets completely overridden. And, you know, it's really basic, right? It's a green arrow, you shoot it out, it poisons enemies, and it counts as though it has hit, though. This is something that's very different from PoE 1's design for poison. So you have this real incentive to build a bunch of crit chance and a bunch of crit multi, because that will affect the amount of damage that the poison deals. It also scales off of the physical damage that you would do with Poison Burst Arrow, so building for a max Fizz damage hit is really good, too. Now, this is something you can play around with in the campaign, and it's something I liked in the campaign after that like little bit of pain in Act 1, to play around with Plague Finger, which will allow you to poison with elemental damage, and then just getting like a bunch of elemental damage from weird sources like rings or Wake of Destruction boots, you know, boots that can add like an extra flat 25 lightning to attacks that can add a lot of damage early on in the campaign when combined with Plague Finger. You'll kind of phase all of this out once you get to like level 39 and you're able to switch over to Sliver Tongue. But Poison Burst Arrow is super simple, right? You run around shooting it with right click, it poisons enemies. You want to put Deadly Poison and Heft in there so that it will do more damage, and then rapid attacks and mobility are just kind of good for like having it come out faster and you know, not like slowing you down as much. And then I'm using Overextend as my last skill here just because it is a crit based build, so getting more crit bonus is obviously really good for clearing. And something that I did while I was in the campaign with all these skills was I played it like I used as many uniques as I felt like equipping, like, you know, that I had on hand, but I was super ethical with all of the like Jeweler's Orbs and skill gems and support gems and all that. I just used whatever I picked up. I didn't like go start with a 6 link, but you absolutely could. That would definitely make things a lot easier. So Toxic Growth is a skill you're going to pick up kind of like midway through the end, I guess around the end of Act 1, maybe midway through Act 2, depending on how quickly you're moving. And it's been redesigned in this patch to just fire a rain of toxic pods up in the air, no jump or anything, and then you throw a poison onto them, which is kind of hard to do with Poison Burst Arrow, but very easy to do with Plague Bearer, and it will cause them to explode and deal a lot of damage. And they can shotgun on bosses, so it's really valuable to use Concentrated Area. That will actually increase the damage, not just because of the more damage, obviously, but it will cause them to cluster more tightly, and that makes it really, really easy to shotgun a boss with like 7 or 8 hits. The quality on it does make it go up to 10 pods at a time, and then you have some other bonuses in here like Long Fuse that just you know, the amount of time before these things blow up on their own is like half a minute or something. That doesn't matter. Just is 35% more damage. You know, you shoot them with some poison, they'll blow up pretty quickly. Heft again for more damage. Close combat for more damage, because usually when I'm hitting enemies with toxic growth, I'm standing right up in their face. And then Arakali's Lust will give you up to 30% more damage, because this is a hit-based skill, and you're gonna have a bunch of poisons on the enemy. So yeah, 30% more damage is pretty good. So the way that you use this normally in combat is you will throw down a toxic growth set, and then you will hit Plague Bearer right on top of it, and it'll pop them all. Obviously, I can't show that in the hideout. I can just jump into a zone and show that off really quickly. Now, Plague Bearer is the first spirit gem you're going to want to take when you go to Freythorn and do that in Act 1, unlock spirit gems and stuff. Plague Bearer is what you're going to want to take, and it scales its damage purely off of gem level. It's not based on your weapon at all. And like when you hit enemies with poison skills, it builds up. As you can see, it builds up to 100%. And it costs no mana. You just press a button and it does a blast really quick. Does a lot of damage. But obviously you want to keep the level of that gem up as you're progressing through the campaign. You don't have to level it every time, but you know, if you're like deep into Act 3 and you're still running a level 4 Plague Bearer, it's not going to do a lot of damage. And so the way that you use this in normal combat is when you find a rare or something that's super tanky that you're not just right-clicking and one-shotting, you'll throw a Toxic Growth down on them, Plague Bearer right on top of the Toxic Growth instantly, and then they'll die. And the thing that's nice about this is that if they're like, whatever, if they live, then the Toxic Growth will usually pop and re-trigger 100% for Plague Bearer. So you can kind of just bounce back and forth between like Toxic Growth Plague Bearer, Toxic Growth Plague Bearer over and over again on bosses, that kind of thing. And because Toxic Growth is a hit and it's doing physical damage, it leashes mana, so you're able to just sustain mana off of that as well. Then you have a couple of other support skills in here. Vine Arrow is not really that great. It is a slow. It's something you pick up, I think, at level 5 or 6 or so. You know, again, early Act 1. It doesn't really do a lot of damage on its own, but it will copy, I think, half of the damage, or a little bit over half of the damage of poison, right? So you can poison the plant and add a little extra damage. Basically, the way you want to do that is like throw out a Vine Arrow and then throw out the Toxic Growth, hit it all with Plague Bearer, and then that'll do a little extra damage to the boss. As for the rest of your spirit gems, Wind Dancer and Ghost Dance are like pretty classic combo. You take Wind Dancer with your second spirit gem, Ghost Dance with your third. I did play around with Herald of Plague for a while. Didn't really feel like it was like particularly helpful or necessary or anything. Then there's Toxic Domain. This is a newly added skill in this patch. It's something you pick up in like the level 50 range. It's pretty expensive, and as you can see, it's a pretty small area that it affects. It does give you a little bit of life regen, but it also increases all your skill costs by 25%, which is a lot. And it makes it so that you basically get kind of like a ranged version of Toxic Growth, the way that Toxic Growth throws a bunch of pods down. Toxic Domain makes it so that when you shoot enemies, it'll apply a pod to them. You can blow them up in the same way. It's not as good for damage. I really don't think it's like all that great. I played around with it and kind of tried to make it work. I don't really love it. I don't think you really should use it. Then Despair is something I only started using like later on in the camp, or in the like last handful of hours of mapping. And you know, it's just like a way to reduce enemy chaos res, isn't it? You know, you could use Heightened Curse and Magnified Area. I'm using Prolonged Duration and Efficiency to make it like last longer and cost less. I know people like, not that I can ever remember the name of the support gem, but one of the supports that makes it blow up or go off faster. I think it takes it from like a little less than half a second to like a little less than a quarter of a second. You know, that's fine, but I think I like this setup more, not having to cast it as much. No, that is part of why I'm using the like main hand, offhand setup in the tree here, is I'm taking a bunch of offhand nodes to buff curse effect, and also to give myself int along the way, and then like 5 points of strength as well, so I can equip this second red gem. That's why my strength is like showing as inadequate whenever I'm not in my offhand setup. And so I have just like a wand with some level of chaos spells, and offhand with some level of chaos, or all spells, bit of cast speed on the whatever it is, focus. I don't know, I'm not a caster guy, bit of int as well to help with keeping this stuff equipped. And then you can see it doesn't even have full mods. Like, honestly, I don't even know if it should be plus chaos levels, because the mana cost is like pretty large. You can see the difference in mana cost. It goes from what, 188 up to 230. So maybe I should be doing level, but it does get larger and lasts longer, and it looks pretty cool. So definitely good to do that. You do want to have a high level to spare. If you try to run a low level curse, then it won't even affect enemies, and that's obviously not good. I wanted to play around with Wither support, but Wither is now kind of been redesigned where it requires you to actually do a good amount of damage with hits with the Chaos skill that's applying Wither in order for it to apply stacks of Wither, so it seems like it's just completely dead for poison builds, and that's, I think, kind of why poison skills are doing so much damage. Like, Toxic Growth hits like a train, and if that were also getting boosted by like 50, 60, 70% from Wither, then that would probably be overpowered, imbalanced, whatever. All right, so that's like the offhand setup. Let's run through the rest of the gear. So we're using like evasion and energy shield bases on all of our armor slots, and just kind of going for like a combination of like life and resistances, and move speed, evasion, and energy shield, obviously, like all the stuff you need to be able to equip items and like not get instantly killed by monsters. Any flat fizz that you can get added to gloves or rings is going to be very helpful. Plus, gem levels on your amulet is good. It's not really that important. This was an amulet that I bought. Somebody else crafted this. I think it was like a brick. Ultimately, this costs less to buy than it would have to craft because the current state of plus level of projectile skills bases is, it's like double-digit divines. This is the most expensive piece that I have equipped on the character, though, and it was still not that bad. Like, all of this whole build, even as much damage as it's doing, is far, far less than, like, a decent Deadeye bow, right? And so the real centerpiece of the build is the Sliver Tongue. This doesn't have a lot of flat damage, obviously, but it's kind of doing the same thing. Not literally, but a similar thing to what Tangle Tongue was doing last league, where you're just getting a ton of extra value out of this unique that has a really high crit chance, as you can see, 11% crit chance. And so you go, all right, the damage on this thing stinks, but you can scale the damage in a bunch of other ways to compensate for that. And then it has just all upside from there. So you do want to get a good roll on it. They can roll from 4 to 6% crit chance. I have this one that's 6% crit and triple socket. But then you get built-in life and mana leech, so that's taken care of. You get Arrow's Fork, which helps a ton with clear. You get Arrow's Pierce after forking, which helps a ton with clear. You're essentially getting 2 extra links on your main skill, your Poison Burst Arrow. So you're getting like a kind of a built-in 8 link on that, and then maybe even more with the crit chance, So then you just want to build for like crit damage and flat damage as much as you possibly can elsewhere. And that's exactly what we're doing. I have crit damage bonus on the gloves, crit chance on the helm, a little bit of rarity here and there, not necessarily as much as I would like, although RNG's been pretty nice to me. I found multiple Omens of Light in the campaign. I found 2, so that's pretty cool. And then Rizlatha's Coil, it adds 40% more maximum fizz attack damage. You can, 30 to 40, but you can obviously get it corrupted to be even more than 40. And yeah, like, it works really, really well. It combines really nicely with Heft to give you even more max fizz hit damage, and that's where all of your damage comes from, basically. Like, just scaling that in conjunction with crit chance and crit damage, or crit bonus, that kind of does it. And then the final piece here is just the Quiver. You want +2 level of all proj skills. That's like pretty easy free damage. Flat fizz is going to be huge. Increased damage with both skills is going to be huge. And then any crit mods you can get, or any of these unveiled mods, like this one, projectile attacks have a chance to fire additional projectiles while moving. That's why you'll see sometimes I'll fire out 3 arrows instead of 1, although now it doesn't want to. There we go, finally. There are obviously other good Quiver mods. You can just go with like double crit. Flat fizz is obviously good. Any sort of flat elemental damage isn't going to do anything for you, but like here's another one that's pretty decent. Projectiles still 20% increased damage with hits against enemies within 2 meters. That can be pretty good for like bursting bosses down really quickly with Toxic Growth and Plague Bear. So that's Poison Pathfinder. It's so good. The build is everything we could have hoped for, and honestly more. Alright, that's it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and join the Skipping Sleep Studio Discord and become part of our community. And finally, thank you to all of our channel members. If you want to support us so we can keep making more content, become a channel member or come boost our Discord. Thanks for watching. Bye.